I don't want to call it big quarterback news, but the other sort of rumor that was floating around per Mike Florio of Pro Football Focus or Pro Football Talk, pardon me, was the fact that I believe it was the scouting combine a little earlier in the year that apparently there was some discussion about the 49ers and the Minnesota Vikings having talks about Kirk Cousins. And I don't think it's necessarily a far fetched idea because Kyle Shanahan has always seemed to be linked to his former quarterback in Washington. However, I find it difficult to believe that there's any fire behind the smoke, so to speak. But it is something that was brought up this week, and I saw some people tweeting about it. So, I mean, look, we threw some gasoline on the Lamar Jackson thing. I still think Tom Brady still has a chance to maybe come out of retirement. I don't know if it's for the 49ers, but I'll keep that in my back pocket, just like my San Diego State bet. And apparently Kirk Cousins was evidently on the 49ers radar.
This whole thing it's getting really tiring because I mean, so what? There was the conversation that the Niners had or didn't have, whatever, with Ben Roethlisberger last year. There was obviously Tom Brady conversations last year, a couple of years ago, and this offseason, it seems like. There's the stuff that we talked about last week about Lamar Jackson. Now there's this rumor about Kirk Cousins. I mean, just throw any quarterback out there who's at least halfway decent, and it feels like the 49ers. There's some story that, the Niners are interested. There's rumors around the league. Kyle Shanahan is eyeing so-and-so to be his backup, to be his new starter. At a certain point, I'm just kind of ready to ignore all of it, Evan, until something concrete happens. And I don't think anything concrete happens. I think the Niners quarterback room is set. I'm just going to start ignoring these things from now on because the Niners have been linked to just about every potentially available halfway decent quarterback that has played in the league over the last 5 years. I'm ready to just ignore everything from here on out.
So the quote from Mike Florio, again, a Pro Football Talk, was, quote, apparently at the scouting combine, there was some chatter, there was some noise among people within the broader league structure, not the media, although I don't know what broader league structure really references. But people in the league were talking about Cousins being traded to the 49ers. That was a hot topic at one point in Indianapolis, quote. So I think the Vikings restructured Cousins' deal to essentially create a situation where this is probably his last year with Minnesota, and he's coming up on another, free agent deal if he so chooses, and someone is willing to give him. I think he got entirely guaranteed on his last 3-year deal over $100 million. So who knows if that'll happen again? But Mark, the quote towards the end of this conversation that I thought was maybe the most telling and more interesting quote was the fact that they were discussing this was all within the conversation of Trey Lance needing a new start. And I also wonder maybe at the time if Florio and the rest of the younger Sims was potentially thinking that Brock Purdy might not be ready for the beginning of the season, and Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers are in win now mode. And so Kirk Cousins in a trade might make sense because he's coming off the books next year and he'd be able to give Kyle what he wants. I'm not sure how they're sort of connecting these dots, but what is becoming increasingly clear to me is that there is conversation around the league, and I'm sure in San Francisco, surrounding Trey Lance and just that, needing a new start. Because as we've talked about throughout the recent episodes, there is not much confidence, at least aesthetically, coming out of San Francisco for their former first-round pick. And so if everyone is kind of looking and checking in on Trey Lance, who just wants to see what plausibly might be on the table, maybe Minnesota has an idea of, last year was pretty damn good. Kirk Cousins is, probably not going to be in our pay range next year. Maybe there's something we could potentially work out with Trey Lance. I mean, that's the only place that my mind goes. But at the end of the day, not just for the 49ers, but for the Vikings, like you just won 13 games last year. You were a top 3 team in the NFC. Why would you move off your quarterback this offseason?
Well, the answer is because they know last year was a fluke, Evan. That's the answer. I mean, it's very obvious. But I mean, No, I just want to rewind to a couple of months ago, and someone brought this up. So there was the Niners end of season press conference where Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch took the podium after the NFC Championship game loss, after Brock Purdy's injury, after Jimmy Garoppolo didn't suit up, all of that before the Super Bowl, but after the NFC Championship game. Um, and I tweeted out a Kyle Shanahan quote, and someone must have been name searching Trey Lance or whatever, and retweeted it, and it brought it back up into my timeline. And the quote from Kyle Shanahan was, "We have two starters on our team that we can win with, so we're not that eager to go looking around." I know we've referenced that quote since then, but I don't think we've actually said it in a while, word for word, what the actual quote was.
And that quote was before they acquired Sam Darnold.
Exactly. So before Sam Darnold, then again, we talked about there's kind of a line where if it's a quarterback above that line, a better performer above that line, then it tells you what they think about Trey Lance. That seems just like a bald-faced lie at this point now, Evan. That line from Kyle Shanahan, we have two starters on our team that we can win with, so we're not that eager to go looking around. Again, maybe all these rumors that I just referenced, Kirk Cousins, Ben Roethlisberger last year, I know that one doesn't really apply to this conversation. Tom Brady, all the other rumors, Lamar Jackson, all of that, maybe not all of them are legitimate. But you add in Sam Darnold, there's got to be some shred of truth to these rumors. The Niners clearly do not believe in Trey Lance, despite the fact that Kyle Shanahan straight up said he's a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. And maybe you're right. Maybe that's where these rumors are coming from. It's not necessarily the 49ers' interest in quarterback X from, whatever team. But the reason is other teams are picking up on the fact that the Niners are not happy with Trey Lance, and they're trying to take advantage of a situation where a young, unproven quarterback who still could be good, you really don't know, might be going for relatively cheap. And they're calling in and saying, hey, you could have our veteran quarterback if you want. Maybe that's where these rumors are coming from, as opposed to the 49ers initiating them. So maybe there's a bit of leeway there for the 49ers to say, hey, it's not us starting these conversations, but still, everything else that they have done recently makes it seem like they're not that confident in Trey Lance.
Yeah, and look, I do give the 49ers credit for clearly in season not allowing the rumors or the interest in Ben Roethlisberger or Phillip Rivers calling the 49ers to leak. And you obviously don't want that happening during the middle of your season. But the timing is interesting, Mark, because all of this has surrounded not one, your starting quarterback going down with an elbow injury, even though he appears to be on track and has said so. And two, with you acquiring a new quarterback in Sam Darnold. So when you factor in the chatter about Rivers, Roethlisberger, Lamar, and now Kirk Cousins, like no matter how relevant or real a possibility these all are or were, it does point to you having clear discussion in your own building about what to do at quarterback, and you don't feel necessarily confident, maybe not in Brock, but clearly in the rest of those guys to have an established hierarchy. Because if not, I do think these rumors would not be swirling around what did Florio call it, broader league circles, or two, there would be some sort of public damnation of all of these rumors of like Kyle Shanahan kind of described. Look, we got two starting quarterbacks, and I feel like that would be the maintained sentiment throughout this offseason, whereas we haven't necessarily heard him rebuke that, but I don't think we have heard that affirmed. And maybe he decides he doesn't need to, and that's just not his place, and that's not what he's going to do. But the mixed signals between he, along with John Lynch, through first the end of season press conference, then the scouting combine, then the NFL owners meetings, to me does point to some sort of internal strife going on as it pertains to anyone below Brock Purdy. And then, of course, until Brock Purdy is actually healthy and ready to go, potentially that starting quarterback spot.
I think he might be onto something there, because In the past, and I remember talking about this a little bit after the Jimmy G lip reading gate. If you remember, after week 3,
Remember it well.
week 3, the terrible
Place
loss in
sucked, man.
Denver. Yeah, where the question was, what did Jimmy say? And the consensus on Twitter was Jimmy said your plays, suck, man. There might have been an expletive mixed in there. I don't exactly remember. And Kyle Shanahan was asked about it, I think, the next day on his media conference call, and basically was like, I don't care. Like, I don't. He might have said it, might have not, whatever. Like, I don't care. I spend zero time thinking about that sort of thing. So there's a part of me, Evan, where Kyle Shanahan hears these rumors. Niners are interested in Kirk Cousins. Oh wow, they're going to want to try to get Tom Brady out of retirement. There's a part of me who thinks, okay, Kyle Shanahan hears that. It's patently false. The Niners have never been in contact with either of those guys, and it's 100% a lie. Don't know where the reporter came up with it. But does Kyle Shanahan care enough to even come out and say anything? There's a relatively big part of me that thinks no, he doesn't care enough. Like, everything that he has said about that sort of rumor in the past makes you believe it's not worth his time. But there's another part, Evan, where let's pretend for a moment that Kyle Shanahan still has all the belief in the world in Trey Lance. He's convinced he can be a really good player. Maybe he's not convinced that he's better than Brock Purdy, and he still wants Brock Purdy to start. But he's still confident in Trey Lance. He actually believes the quote that I just brought up a little bit ago. We have 2 starters on our team that we can win with, so we're not going to go looking around. Maybe that's 100% true. And if you feel that way, Evan, do you have a bit of an obligation to try to put an end to some of these rumors and all this speculation that is floating around? So I'm kind of being pulled in 2 different directions here, because I can see Kyle Shanahan just saying these rumors are stupid. I don't even need to address them. But he probably would feel the need to maybe at least address something if he still was entirely confident in Trey Lance and felt like he had a responsibility to protect him a bit. If he isn't that confident in him, maybe he doesn't have that big of an issue with just writing it off and not addressing anything at all.
Yeah, I think, well, and to go back to that press conference or phone call in which he kind of tried to deflate the Jimmy G lip
Yeah.
reading stuff, or said, I think he said he wasn't aware of it. Like, I don't spend my time on social media, and my
Yeah.
guy maybe or maybe not have told me right before it, but I'm pretty sure to take people behind the scenes in radio, there's a drop from that conference call, and a drop is where 2 hosts are speaking like we are now, and then a producer can drop this piece of audio in to give added effect, and I'm pretty sure that is where I clipped the huh. Like, Kyle Shanahan just immediately hearing that question and going, huh, like, just so dismissive. And to be honest, it's kind of a niche one, but it's one of my favorite drops. So I had to sneak that in. But I do think you're right, Mark. Like, the amount of non-dismissal, I guess, it's not alarming, but it's just something that kind of raises your awareness about these things. I do think Kyle Shanahan would say, "Hey, look, it does me no good to come out and
Yeah.
completely deflate these because number one, I don't have to, and anything I say is going to be used against me in the court of media law." But I also think that he is maybe not also trying to give any of his own quarterbacks a leg up on the other or any sort of added verbal ammunition to like or dislike their current standing within the quarterback room because who knows right now. I mean, Trey Lance is probably pissed about where he's at. I mean, he wouldn't say that because he's a professional, but I don't know, maybe that's he wants to give Sam Darnold a reason to believe that he can go out and win the starting job, and he wants Brock Purdy to believe that the job is still perfectly his and just waiting for him. And who knows what Kyle Shanahan is going to do. I don't think he knows at this point in the offseason because a lot has to play out, but I think there's some of that in there too.
Yeah, you're probably right. It's probably somewhere in the middle is where the truth lies, and it does seem like it's always that way. It's not one extreme where Kyle Shanahan hates Trey Lance, but it's also not the other extreme where he's just never going to address any single rumor. It's probably somewhere in the middle, but I don't know. I mean, it does seem like with every passing day, every little piece of information that comes out, every statement from John Lynch or Kyle Shanahan, it does seem like the Niners are drifting further and further away from the idea that Trey Lance is part of the future of the 49ers. That seems relatively straightforward to me. Maybe and a lot of people are totally missing something that changes the calculus on that, but it does seem like we're getting further along that track with every passing day.